A girl and her two fathers travel to an isolated cabin in the woods. After four armed strangers break into their home, the family discovers their vital role in preventing the end of the world. Initially skeptical of the strangers' incredible claims, they are forced to choose between saving themselves or the rest of humanity. Welcome to Rapid Movie Recaps. Please subscribe, like, and turn notifications on. Please help support our channel by checking our merchandise down below. Wen captures grasshoppers in a forest near their vacation cabin and places them in a glass jar. Leonard, a tall, tattooed man, suddenly approaches her and befriends her. While Leonard assists Wen in catching insects, she reveals that she has two fathers, distinguishing her from other children. Suddenly, as Leonard listens to Wen, he looks toward the trees as if he is awaiting someone. When the girl observes his odd behavior, he suggests that they play a game to get to know each other better. They will take turns removing petals from a flower and then pose questions to one another. During Wen's turn, she asks Leonard why he came to the cabin, to which he responds that he wants to befriend her family. After Leonard inquires about the scar above Wen's upper lip, she reveals that she was born with a broken lip that required many doctors to repair. Then Leonard notices the arrival of his three companions. As they approach, Wen observes that they are armed, which frightens the child. Before she returns to the cabin, Leonard reveals that they have an important mission and that she and her fathers will be required to make a difficult choice. Additionally, he advises her to let them into the cabin because if she does not, they will find an alternate route. Wen dashes to the back patio to alert her fathers, Eric and Andrew, about the armed intruders. Initially, they do not believe her, but when Leonard knocks on the cabin door, Eric attempts to send them away out of suspicion. However, Leonard insists that the group be allowed inside so they can communicate face to face. Leonard announces through the door that their group is on a mission to rescue individuals. Andrew observes through the window that one of the suspects is carrying a chained pickaxe, prompting him to call the police. When Andrew tries to make the call, however, the lines are dead because one of the strangers ripped the phone line. Wen asks why they have weapons after Leonard tries to convince them to let the group in, but he corrects her, saying that they are tools. When the couple refuses to let the strangers in, the intruders attempt to break in, prompting the family to lock all the doors and windows. Nonetheless, Redmond breaks the glass window in order to unlock the door. In the meantime, the others enter through the basement. Eric suggests they dash to the car, but before they can open the door, a nervous Sabrina appears and knocks Eric to the ground, where he hits his head and passes out. As a nurse, she is compelled by panic to attend to Eric's concussion, but Andrew angrily yells at her to back off. As they attempt to rouse Eric, Redmond successfully enters the cabin and engages Andrew in a fight. After Andrew subdues Redmond, he is shocked to see Leonard holding Wen, accompanied by Adrian. Andrew once informed his parents that he and Eric were together. Despite his parents' disapproval, the couple vows to continue their relationship. After Sabrina treats Eric's head wound, he awakens and realizes that he and Andrew are restrained to chairs, while Wen is seated on the floor. Leonard believes that the cartoon on the television teaches empathy and tolerance. Andrew, infuriated, suspects that they targeted their family because they are prejudiced against the same gender couple, but Leonard asserts that they harbor no animosity or prejudice against them. The strangers then gather and introduce themselves individually. Sabrina claims to be a skilled post-operative nurse from Southern California. She depleted her entire savings to travel to Pennsylvania and speak with them. At home, she is a half-sister who Wen reminds her of. Leonard reveals that he is a part-time bartender and a Chicago-based second-grade teacher who runs an after-school program. Then Redmond speaks from his seat without revealing his true identity. Leonard reprimands him and explains that the introductions are required to complete their mission. After Leonard explains that his aggression is frightening the family, Redmond concedes and states that he is a Massachusetts-based gas station attendant. In the past, he committed foolish acts and served time in prison, but he's improved now. Adrian interrupts Redmond while he describes how his father abused him as a child. Eric states that tying them up is not the best way to recruit them into their group before she introduces herself. He then requests that the curtains be drawn, which Sabrina explains is because his concussion has rendered him light-sensitive. Adrian abruptly introduces herself as a passionate line cook at a Mexican restaurant who loves to feed people and has cats when Redmond agrees to fix the curtains. Leonard then states the family's mission to prevent the apocalypse and explains that the fate of humanity rests in their hands. They must be willing to sacrifice a family member to save the world. If they do not comply, only they will survive while the rest of humanity perishes. The couple dismisses his outlandish story, deeming him insane. Eric insists that they did nothing wrong as Leonard explains the repercussions, and Leonard concurs. However, per their visions, they are the chosen family. Even if the fate of the world is at stake, Andrew declares no sacrifices will be made in their family. Leonard asserts that visions of the end of the world led the four of them to each other in the cabin. He He explains that a violent tsunami, a plague, the sky falling like glass, and eternal darkness will occur. Andrew rejects his claim, asserting that everyone is delusional. In the meantime, Eric asks them in a calm manner how their family fits into their vision, to which Leonard somberly responds that every time they refuse to make a decision, a plague will be released. The couple, unfazed, shakes their heads, prompting Adrienne to place Wen on Andrew's lap to shield him from a gruesome sight. Redmond then kneels and places a white cloth bag over his head while trembling. Eric observes a strange light in the doorway mirror. The team suddenly executes Redmond by bashing his head with their sharp instruments. Eric suddenly recalls that he and Andrew adopted Wen when she was a baby with a cleft lip. After Redmond's death, the team cleans up everything. Leonard then changes the channel to a news station, where they all view a report on a series of earthquakes and tsunamis occurring in the Pacific Northwest. Leonard explains that the first plague occurred due to Redmond's execution. Adrienne and Sabrina comment that the footage of the tsunami is identical to what they saw in their visions. After Leonard turns off the television, he informs the captives that they must make a decision first thing the following morning. Then Eric recalls the first day of their trip. As he drives to the cabin in the forest, his family sings along with Booby Shoes on the radio. When they arrive at their destination, they swim in a lake nearby. Eric awakens in front of the bathroom mirror, being treated by Sabrina, who claims that she initially did not believe in the visions, but eventually did, and is convinced that Eric will eventually come to the same conclusion. She attempts to persuade him that the visions are real, and that he must take their side, but Eric refuses, stating that he is on the side of his family. Later in the living room, Andrew informs Eric of his suspicion that Leonard is orchestrating the tragic events in order to make their visions appear real. Wen attempts to flee the cabin through the basement, but Leonard catches and returns her. While Leonard calms Wen's fears, Andrew asserts that their family has been targeted. He suddenly recalls the night he was attacked in a bar years ago and claims that Redmond was the perpetrator. Eric informs him that the man's name was O'Bannon, but his partner maintains his position. When Leonard defends their companion, Andrew maintains his position and orders them to retrieve Redmond's wallet in order to confirm his true identity. He argues that the fact that a man who assaulted him years ago tied them up is not a coincidence, and that they are the victims of an elaborate scheme. Leonard, however, refuses to comply with Andrew's request, arguing that his name is irrelevant as long as he also witnessed the visions. However, Adrienne is concerned about their mission, recalling that Redmond was the one who posted about the cabin on their message board, prompting everyone to begin having visions of the cabin. Leonard corrects her, stating that the visions occurred prior to Redmond's revelation about the cabin. Andrew, a human rights attorney, threatens the team because he believes they are perpetrating a fraud. Leonard responds by displaying a picture of his students, implying that they inspired him to save them from the end of the world. Before the sun sets, Leonard rearranges the couple's seats so that they can contemplate their decision for the following day. The following morning, as Wen enjoys the delectable breakfast prepared by Adrienne, Andrew explains to Eric his plan to retrieve the gun from the trunk of the car, once he has freed himself from the ropes. After confronting them, Andrew explains how membership in an online group can lead to a destructive shared delusion. Leonard argues that they met on the boardwalk because they shared the same ideals and decided to meet there. While Andrew distracts Leonard's team, Wen hands her father Eric a knife, which he uses to cut the rope. The team then gathers before the family, prepared to hear their decision. Adrienne walks forward and admits that she will be sacrificed if they refuse to choose a sacrifice. Eric attempts to persuade them that nothing will occur, but Adrienne insists that nothing will cease unless they make a decision. She then reveals that she has a son named Charlie, whom she has repeatedly seen die in her apocalyptic visions. However, the unconvinced couple remains committed in their refusal to sacrifice a family member. Therefore, Adrienne kneels and covers her head with a white cloth, offering herself as a sacrifice for the cause. After Adrienne's death, Leonard declares the second plague to have arrived. He orders Sabrina to turn on the television, where they observe a deadly influenza outbreak. Eric then admits that he saw a reflection of a figure in the mirror behind Redmond before he was executed. Andrew attempts to reason with his partner, explaining that his concussion has made him sensitive to light, hence the appearance of the figure in the mirror. He then claims that the television programs are pre-recorded and that Leonard and Sabrina can only watch them when the time on their watches coincides, which is why they keep checking. Wen demands to watch her favorite cartoon all of a sudden. Eric finishes cutting the rope while Leonard is distracted and then picks up the weapon lying on the ground to attack the tall man. As Eric threatens Leonard, Andrew escapes and dashes to the vehicle. Sabrina strikes him in the knee, preventing him from escaping. He hits her back in order to get into his car. As Sabrina attempts to break the car window, Andrew opens a box containing an unloaded pistol from the trunk. She opens the door, hits the man, and begs him to surrender as he nervously loads the gun. Andrew shoots and threatens Sabrina, who eventually flees after the gun has been loaded. Eric continues to point a weapon at Leonard in the cabin, despite Leonard's efforts to calm him down. Later, he explains to the man with a concussion that their family was chosen to make a difficult decision due to the purity of their love for one another. Andrew returns to the cabin, points his weapon at Leonard, who informs them that it is time for the next sacrifice and requests their decision once more. Sabrina returns unexpectedly, but Andrew shoots her, severely wounding her. Eric comments on Andrew's temper in a bar many years ago, and Andrew responds that he can be irritable at times. A man suddenly approaches them, disturbed by their loud conversation. Andrew lashes out at the impolite man, who then walks away. The man returns seconds later and smashes a bottle on Andrew's head. After this incident, Andrew decided to purchase a handgun. Leonard asks the couple for their decision in the present, but they continue to refuse to sacrifice a family member. This causes Leonard to strike Sabrina, effectively putting an end to her life. While Leonard covers the lifeless woman, Andrew goes to Redmond's lifeless body to retrieve his wallet's identification. He then returns to the cabin and throws Redmond's identification on the floor, revealing that he is O'Bannon, the bar attacker. After that, Andrew orders Leonard to go to the restroom so that they can lock him in. However, upon closing the door, they heard glass shattering, which led them to believe that he had escaped through the window. To verify, Andrew removes the rope from the door and observes the broken bathroom window. He fires at the bathtub curtain to determine if Leonard is present, but the tall man eventually pounces on him and seizes his gun. As Leonard points the gun at them, he instructs them to turn on the television, where they see multiple airline failures resulting in over 700 plane crashes worldwide. Eric recalls the third plague, in which the sky will fall and shatter to the ground like glass. To convince them that he's seen this in a vision, Leonard turns his back on the television and mimics the news anchor's words, but Andrew remains convinced that everything is a hoax. Meanwhile, Eric is beginning to reconsider his position. Leonard asks everyone to move to the rear deck. Before the tall man commits suicide, Eric instructs Wen to go to the treehouse and listen to music, preventing her from witnessing yet another horrifying act. Steady in the rocking chair, Leonard tries for the final time to convince the couple to save humanity by sacrificing a member of their family. When the couple refuses to make a decision, however, the tall man slits his own throat. Moments later, a storm rapidly develops in the sky. Eric discusses the figure he saw in the light once more upon the couple's return to the cabin, claiming that the arrival of the four strangers represents various aspects of humanity. Redmond represented malice, Adrian care, Sabrina healing, and Leonard leadership. Eric concludes, after putting all the pieces together, that the four strangers were the four horsemen of the apocalypse, and that the family needed to grieve their passing. Eric believes that their family was chosen because they are capable of making decisions similar to when they decided to adopt Wen. Eric, realizing that time is running out, makes a final decision. He hands Andrew the gun and requests that his husband shoot him to save everyone, especially Wen. When Andrew insists that he should be the sacrifice, Eric describes a future in which Wen has a successful career and a fulfilling romantic life, and Andrew will be there to witness it all. Upon observing his companion's acceptance of his fate, Andrew pulls the trigger to prevent the end of the world. After grieving his loss, Andrew rushes to the treehouse to comfort his distressed daughter. Meanwhile, lightning strikes and ignites the cabin. Before leaving the forest, Andrew and Wen watch the cabin as it burns. They then continue walking through the trees until they reach the group's vehicle. Andrew pulls over at a nearby diner, where they join others in watching the news. The fact that the ocean has stopped rising, the rest of the planes have landed safely, and there have been no flu-related deaths in the past 2 hours confirms that Eric's sacrifice saved humanity. Later, Andrew returns to the vehicle and discovers the four strangers' belongings: a certificate signed by Leonard's students, Sabrina's nurse identification card, a photograph of Adrienne and her son, and Redmond's employee identification card. Andrew and Wen are shocked and saddened to hear Boogie Shoes on the radio, the same song that played on their way to the cabin a few days earlier, when Eric was still alive. After turning the radio on and off, Andrew decides to leave the song playing as he and Wen begin their new life without Eric. This movie can be purchased at the link in the description below. Thank you for watching.